General business, order of the day number 26, plebiscite, Future Migration Level Bill 2018, second reading debate.
Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. I ask the question, do you think the current rate of immigration to Australia is too high? Our rate of net immigration is a topic that has regularly made an appearance at the forefront of public debate in recent years, and so it should. Immigration impacts considerably on Australia's overall population growth, which in turn impacts on lifestyle we are all able to experience. It just makes common sense to understand that more people means more demand for services. If those services are not established at a pace that keeps up with the growth, then lifestyles will go backwards. And with the stagnant lifestyles ordinary Australians have been experiencing in the past decade, we certainly don't want things to get any worse. Raising an issue like immigration, in particular the idea of an immigration slowdown, also seems to attract those who want to drag the racism tag into the discussions. It's already happened with this bill, and I really expect nothing less from those who have already tossed this issue into the too hard basket and don't have the fortitude to tackle the difficult matters that affect the lives of all citizens and residents of Australia. As I have said previously, this bill is not about where people originate when they come to live in our great nation or why. It is strictly about the numbers and the impact those numbers, significant numbers on a global scale, mind you, are having on our lives here. Australia's considerable population growth has been linked quite publicly in recent years to various social issues. Infrastructure being unable to keep up with the population growth in our suburbs, services being unable to keep up with the increased demand that results from the collective needs of more people. Infrastructure Australia, an Australian government body, also notes these two concerns. It says, lags in infrastructure provision cost the economy, but they also affect people's quality of life. If you don't get the timing of new housing and infrastructure right, our growth centres risk being characterised by congested roads, overcrowded trains and buses, over-enrolment in schools, hospital bed shortages and constraints on community infrastructure. My next point. Our considerable population growth has been linked to higher demand for housing and subsequently ever-rising house prices, which for many Australians now puts owning their own home further out of reach. And it's not just population growth generally. One OECD study notes very clearly that evidence suggests that changes in population growth stemming from increases in net migration tend to have a greater influence on real house prices in the medium term than natural increases. The great and dedicated Australian Dick Smith has spoken about this. Regarding the housing affordability crisis, very simply he said this: when you consider the scale of its impact on the problem, population growth gets very little scrutiny or debate relative to other causes involved. In fact, it is hardly acknowledged at all, so let me say it up front. Australia's immigration-fuelled population growth is a major cause of our country's housing affordability crisis. Mr Smith has also noted the number of years that it now takes to save up for a house deposit, by saying 10% of an average wage. In 1975, it was 6 years. In 2016, it is 25 years. They are all factors that highlight the impact of our high population growth on the ordinary Australian. The aspiration of owning a home is more and more at risk. And my final point. Population growth has also been linked to concerns about increased demands for jobs, stagnant wages growth and subsequent unemployment and underemployment. An ABC analysis noted Australia currently has a population growth rate of around 1.6%, more than double the rate of the United Kingdom and of the USA, and driven largely by immigration. Other sources suggest a similar figure of 1.7% growth. The ABC analysis also noted the subsequent impacts on wages and jobs. It said, In the short term, an increase of the supply of labour through high migration should mean lower wages growth. And there are about 680,000 unemployed Australians and an additional 1 million Australians who have a job but would like to work more hours. It's also been acknowledged that many of the jobs created these days in Australia are going to immigrants, further adding to the pressures on job seekers everywhere and their families. The Sydney Morning Herald recently noted in recent years many additional full-time jobs have been created, but it's equally true that many of those jobs have gone to immigrants and other new entrants to the labour force, meaning the rate of unemployment hasn't fallen below 5%. Despite these facts about our high population growth, there remains a belief in the Australian political and business sphere that high population growth is necessary to achieve high economic growth. Big business also loves high immigration. Big retailers like Harvey Norman love high immigration because it means more customers to buy their products. But the influence of Mr Harvey and other corporate leaders on the debate should be lessened, because the focus should be more on the quality of life of Australian residents and citizens rather than the hip pockets of big businesses. The UK experience is that, in the period from 1995 to 2011, mass migration had made the country very significantly poorer. There's a considerable difference between the value of the services they claimed and the amount of taxation they paid. The figure initially was estimated at a shortfall of $95 billion, but was later revised upwards to $114 billion before being raised further to £159 billion. The dot points I outlined suggest that the ordinary Australian, including Mr Morrison's quite Australians, may not necessarily be seeing the supposed benefits of having more and more people coming here, all seeking to be somehow satisfied in all these specific criteria. It is worth looking at the UK situation with regard to immigration, which has already been mirrored in some areas in Australia. Their population is some 2.5 times that of Australia, and their net migration numbers are around the same as ours. Concern among citizens in the UK over this figure and the impact it was having on life in the UK can be attributed considerably to the result of the Brexit vote in 2016. Australia's current net migration, according to the latest budget papers, is around 271,000 people. It's not the figure of 190,000 that was bandied around in March just prior to the election. But then why let the facts get in the way of a good story when an election is coming? New migrants to the UK have seen it as arriving almost in heaven. They have often arrived from nations where living conditions are poorer, so the conditions of their new home, even though they might be poor by UK standards, are wonderful in comparison. Jobs are potentially more readily available because they are often prepared to work for wages that are much lower than those in their previous country of origin. In the book, The Strange Death of Europe, author Douglas Murray notes that high among the reasons why people flock to Europe are the knowledge that its welfare states will look after migrants who arrive, and the knowledge that however long it takes or however poorly migrants may be looked after, they will still enjoy a better standard of living and a better roster of rights than anywhere else, let alone in their own countries. New migrant workers are an attractive option for business, to the demise of opportunities for existing citizens and residents because of this mindset. We need to ensure the UK situation does not take hold more strongly here, so it's important that this issue is debated properly and that the facts and figures are clear for all to see. To use the terminology of Mr Murray, the situation will see people at the lower end of that market edged out of jobs by people from countries where wages and living standards are far lower and who are therefore willing to work for lower pay. We have seen elements of that emerging in Australia, with some with some migrants and overseas students workers being exploited because they either accept low wages or they are oblivious to our legal wage minimums. Either way, they are filling jobs at a lower rate than that of other Australian citizens and residents. It is not good for those looking for work, and it's not good for our economy. To add further to this situation, there is a high number of the migrants who are now experiencing and benefiting from the better living conditions of the UK, as they also do in Australia, who are sending money back to family members still living back in their poorer conditions in their former homelands. Māori again. The reality is that whatever its other benefits, the economic benefits of immigration accrue almost solely to the migrant. It is migrants who are able to access public facilities that have not previously paid for. It is migrants who benefit from a wage higher than they could earn in their home country, and very often the money that they earn, or much of it, is sent to family outside the United Kingdom rather than being put back into the local economy. It's clear that economies of the host nation are impacted negatively by high rates of immigration. As I touched on earlier, the Australian Prime Minister recently spoke of the aspirations of Australians. Aspirations for a job, perhaps an apprenticeship, or to start their own business, to own a home and save for a comfortable retirement. These are typical traditional Australian aspirations. They are actually quite modest, but let's be honest, for many people they are slipping out of reach. In the past, they were almost a given. They were life's achievements, they were quite reachable if you had a stable job and lived a common sensible life. However, high immigration levels, among other things, are very much the cause of putting the barriers up that prevent these simple aspirations from actually being achieved. Since 2007, Australia's population grew by 5 million, an overall increase of 25%. There are predictions that our population will grow further in the next 50 years to 50 million people. I believe it will be more if we keep going at the rate we're going. And quite alarmingly, 60% of Australia's population growth from 2006 to 2016 came from immigration. The impacts of immigration on areas of provision of services, employment, home ownership and the like also had noticeable impacts on other aspects of life that are starting and building a family. Mr Murray notes that in the UK the majority of new births are from immigrants rather than existing citizens and residents. If it is agreed that a particular country wishes to maintain a stable or slowly growing population, then before importing people from other states, it would surely be more sensible to determine whether there are reasons why people in your own country are not at present having enough children. He adds, only 3 types of people now have 3 children or more: the very rich, the very poor, and recent immigrants. Is the high rate of growth by immigration good or bad? Well, with all these facts and figures on the table, I think it's a legitimate topic to debate. So I'll come back to my original question. Do you think the current rate of immigration to Australia is too high? I believe I know the answer, but I think all Australians, those who live and breathe the consequences of our population growth every day, those who drive the congested roads, the crowded buses and trains, and are stuck in the rental roundabout because house prices just keep rising while wage levels remain dormant. It is those people who should be given a chance to vote on this issue, so we can find out once and for all what the people really think. In my previous speech on this topic, I noted that the Lowy Institute survey reported a sharp spike in anti-immigration sentiment in 2018, causing its annual sentiment measure to change from positive to negative. The 2017 Scanlon survey reported 37% of respondents see the current immigration intake as too high, but when respondents remained anonymous, 74% said that Australia did not need any more people. In the same year, the Australian Population Research Institute found 54% of respondents who were Australian voters wanted the number of immigrants reduced. So let's do a proper vote. Let every voter have a say and find out what all the people think together. That's what I am proposing in this bill, the plebiscite, Future Migration Level Bill 2018. I am proposing that a plebiscite be held, coinciding with the next federal election, to ensure better convenience and to reduce costs, to ask all Australians their views on this high-impact issue. Let Australians be allowed to cast a vote, yes or no, and so collectively reveal if they believe our immigration rates are, in fact, too high. From there, we can determine what needs to be done to our immigration processes to make any changes that will have the flow-on effect that improves general livability in Australia, employment, housing affordability, less crowding in schools and hospitals, and similar issues. The Prime Minister has previously raised the issue of an immigration cap to keep net migration to Australia at 160,000. Suggestions by former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, following in my lead, that the figure should be cut further, perhaps as low as 110,000. I have even commented as low as 75,000, till we actually can get our infrastructure and services for the Australian people and clean up our own backyard. We're met by concern as to whether it would blow out Australia's deficit further. The comments all add to the many mixed opinions and viewpoints that have contributed to this debate on this issue in the past. So is the current rate of immigration to Australia too high? Let's put this simple question to the people. If the people in this parliament or the government have got the guts to do it, let's hold the plebiscite. Hold it to coincide with the next federal election so we keep the cost down. Let's not sit on our hands on this issue any longer and take steps to understand exactly what the people think and then act with confidence with the resulting useful information. I put a post yesterday on my Facebook page, Pauline Hanson's Please Explain, flagging this plebiscite, and in less than 24 hours it received more than 7,100 comments. That is quite staggering, but shows very clearly that people want to have their say on this matter. With all the politicians having their input, big business and researchers having a say, and academics putting in their 2 cents worth about immigration, don't you think it's time for everyday Australians to also be heard? That, after all, is what democracy is all about.
Senator Stoker.